Welcome to the Learning for Legacy show with me, your host, Afam Onyenakala. This is all about the concept of making generational wealth understandable, practical, and accessible. I'll be exploring a range of topics and sharing conversations, interviews, and more. Because what good is building wealth if we don't build the people? Welcome to the show. I'd like to share a little bit of my story. Part of my journey starts all the way back in the 1920s in an area then known as the former Nigerian Protectorate within the British Empire. My paternal grandfather was an indigenous Igbo native owning animals, farms, and land in a town called Akokwa and within neighboring towns in that southeast Igbo land region of what we call Nigeria today. He took care of many people within his village by financing humanitarian projects and paying the school fees to educate some of the poor people there. His heart was such that he also assisted by giving land as capital to younger entrepreneurs. From the account I've received, a touching scenario came about from a beneficiary who happened to be one of his relatives. Although the story is not clear-cut, some of their family may have been sold into slavery, so my grandfather gave their grandfathers land to cultivate in order to make a living as free people. My paternal grandmother, the wife of my grandfather, was very much just like him, strong in will and spirit. A wealthy and independent woman in her own right who didn't depend on him for money. She was a traditional midwife who happened to deliver almost 50% of the children in the village at that time. In the traditions of the time, however, she wasn't my grandfather's only wife, but when he died, she quickly filled his shoes and even had the heart to pay the school fees for his other children. Now, on the other side of my family, my maternal grandfather was also an indigenous Igbo native, hailing from Asaba, a town in the Igbo-speaking Midwest region of what we call Nigeria today. I understand that this town was also briefly used as the administrative headquarters of the Royal Niger Company at some period, I believe, between 1886 and 1896. And that company was used at the time in acquiring territories that included the British colonies of southern and northern Nigeria before transferring its functions and territories to the British government for the equivalent of £865,000 in the year 1900. Now, this is significant because my grandparents later grew up during the period of colonial Nigeria, where redefined national boundaries also resulted in tensions between various indigenous groups and communities. Now, my maternal grandfather, he traveled from the area before raising his family in Kanu, a town in the north of the country. He balanced both a background in real estate and also owning a petroleum station. As a result of ethnic persecution, he relocated his family back to Asaba before tragically being killed after returning to the north. His body has never been found. Both of these stories had a direct influence on my parents, with them both growing up within a colonial, then independent Nigeria before migrating to a brand new phase of life within the UK. My parents first met in London as a result of leaving a Nigerian republic riddled from the effects of a civil war, which took place between 1966 and 1970. A war which left trauma in large parts of the regions that they grew up within. I was born in England, specifically Leeds, West Yorkshire, but grew up in London, followed by a period in upstate New York, and then back again to London. So I have the unique hybrid of being a Yorkshire-born Londoner of Igbo heritage with fond memories of some formative years spent in America. I originally have a background in mechanical engineering, working in sectors as diverse as defense, rail engineering, and sales. And like many people, I've also had the experience of having and losing jobs. The global financial crisis of 2008 gave me a lot to think about how important it was for people to have access to a personal economy of wealth that could be independent of whatever shocks a national or a global economic crisis could bring. I know from personal experience trying to buy a house during that season and having the process fall apart as a result of these external factors. As the world now begins the recovery from our most recent coronavirus pandemic, it's pretty evident that we all have to look at and rethink what we mean by the world of work, income, business, and how that affects our lifestyles and ultimately our futures. Since the late 1990s, I've been passionate about the whole area of personal development and financial intelligence. I enjoy reading, so you name it, I may have read some of those books, or am reading it, or would like to read it now. Life is about seeing how much we can grow and maximize the unique talents which we all possess. And one thing I've keenly observed are the various ways the financially rich have the ability to increase further, whereas the poor can often have less. And in the 21st century, that divide seems to be increasing. But conversely, advances in technology and connectivity mean it's easier for just about anyone to build wealth, to support their families, and better still leave something for the next generation coming through. But is it as easy as that? And is that enough? There's a wise saying that goes, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. But let's ask ourselves the question, how does that work? Does it perpetuate? If it was easy to do, wouldn't everyone be doing that now? As the son of Nigerian immigrants, I've seen for myself what happens when a community moves to another country and has to start so many things from scratch. It raised for me various questions about legacy and generational wealth. For example, how does your upbringing, your exposure and application affect this? How do institutions, systems, circumstances, and opportunity influence this? I still remember my late father sharing with me of the times he saw signs with the words, "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," as he looked for accommodation in London. Now, he didn't deserve to see those words, and it could have presented a stumbling block that he didn't ask for. How would he respond? Pretty good, I think. The good news is, eventually years later, he bought a house. But wealth, and specifically generational wealth, is much more holistic in scope than it may seem, especially if you just heard the expression for the first time. Most of the time, when you mention wealth, people tend to think of money or financial capital. Now, there's an expression that goes shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. This is where the first generation work really, really hard, often living very modestly, to create a financial springboard for the next. Now, the second generation may attain excellent levels of education, income, and material possessions as they gradually move up in society. The third generation can end up spending the money, working very little, and within 1 generation find itself back to square one. Now, in this particular illustration, we would consider that family's economic condition to be lacking by the end of the third generation. And without proper understanding, the natural instinct would be to just correct the money dynamic to avoid ever being in this position. James E. Hughes Jr., he refers to this as not just a financial problem, but a problem of a family's qualitative wealth. This is what includes human, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial capital, thereby suggesting that complete family wealth consists of 5 components that require significant care. Now, I remember the first time I was heavily in debt. I hated it. I remember a period of doing jobs that I didn't really want, just in order to be responsible enough to just pay the bills. I remember working in some companies that didn't have enough money to pay their staff, and me only finding out on payday that there was no pay. I remember the tension that comes from knowing that I was worth more, but seeing the reality of where I was. And it can be very easy to feel low at those times, but I had a personal vision that helped see me through. But it wasn't easy, and I can just as equally empathize with someone who feels like not going on, feeling the weight and the mental health pressure that comes with that, because absolutely none of us are immune to it. As a man, I've got a particular affinity when seeing other men facing similar challenges, because for them to be unable to address it in the right way, it can result in silent implosion. And the tragic thing is sometimes people will never, ever know. And I don't like seeing that happen. So to those men, keep going. Don't give up. You may be closer to your opportunity than you think. To those women also, keep your head up. An open door is around the corner too. A beautiful part of the change for me was accepting that I had at times, shall we say, a malnourished philosophy about money and wealth, because I had the wrong plan. Problem was that within my social circle, I sometimes found myself around people who were more interested in looking rich as opposed to building wealth. And they didn't have a much better plan either. So what I needed was new vitamins. Yes, new vitamins, baby. Nourishment for the mind. So fast forward, and I decided to start a family-friendly business called Legacy Learning, because I believe families should have a personal economy of wealth that can weather the storms of recession and other challenges at any time. Families that are not hostage to credit rating or debt, where their values, skill, and estate don't end with their generation, but can influence the next. Jesse James once said, "Nothing in life is secure unless you secure it yourself." Now, within that context of taking action, I definitely agree with that sentiment. So along various stages and episodes of the Learning for Legacy show, I'll explore generational wealth topics through 4 key lenses that represent what I stand for. These are: number 1, learning; number 2, laughter; number 3, leadership; and number 4, legacy. Number 1, why learning? Because we grow by learning. The answer to pretty much anything we need is out there by gaining knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. This is why I love the journey of personal development, because knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Knowledge is simply just acquired information, like a library. This is why it's possible to equally encounter both an educated fool and an uneducated sage in the same street. Understanding, on the other hand, is comprehending the knowledge you can see, hear, or do. And wisdom is the discerning ability to apply the principles you now understand. So learning in order to increase wisdom is the key. Number 2, laughter. We should have fun working on and building our lives. It's easier to have great relationships, make money, take on new challenges when you're having fun. And by that, I don't necessarily mean being silly, but the sort of joy that can come when the work, business, or endeavor you do feels like play. That comes from things aligned with your unique personality, your aptitude, and your purpose. Natural levels of energy become a simple byproduct of this. Number 3, leadership. This is where the fun of discipline or the consistency must be greater than just simply having fun. This is that influence to take action to solve problems, thus creating amazing solutions. This is an intrapersonal drive from within to influence interpersonal relationships outwardly to move in a particular direction. This can be within a family, a business, or social dynamic. This is specifically about leading by competence and character, which are two wings of the same plane. To lead effectively, you can't really have one without the other. Deficiency in one or both can cause people to not truly respect you or want to be influenced by you. For example, your competence or skill can open doors for you to excel in your profession, but a character flaw, for example, cheating on your partner with a colleague at work, can cost you everything. Alternatively, you may have the most trustworthy character, but unfortunately are also just lazy in executing projects in time to the point people choose not to rely on you, and that will cost you too. So if you don't know, now you know. Number 4, legacy. This is all about leaving your mark of wisdom, systems, money, love, and service to your family and to the service of subsequent generations. A generational wealth estate orchestrated through deliberate action that has the potential to outlive 3 generations. That means if the dream is big enough, there will be some things you won't complete within your lifetime. But do you have the heart to pass the baton on to the next one? So, as you can tell, the theme of generational wealth is important to me, and I believe it should be accessible to anyone. For those of you already on your way, I would like to know what has already worked for you and what else you'd like to explore. For many others, the daily grind of life can mean you honestly are just sometimes too fatigued to even think about it. I get it. That's okay. For the time I'm privileged to have your ear, I'll share a number of things that hopefully you can see yourself in. All in all, if we use the analogy of an apple tree, consider your money to be your apples, but your wealth to be your apple tree. So let's grow some healthy trees, then we could yield some healthy fruit. I'll do my best to explore that through the content and interviews that I'll share over time. So find your comfortable place whenever a new episode is released, and let's get into it. Thanks for listening to Learning for Legacy. To join our community or find out about what else we get up to, you can follow us on Twitter at Legacy Learning or on our website at www.legacylearning.co.uk. To access additional content or exclusives from this particular episode, please find the information within the show notes.